If you're a chef thinking about leaving restaurants, you've probably searched what is a corporate chef. And what you find is usually vague. You see buzzwords like innovation, R&D, culinary development, but no one really explains what these people actually do. After my conversation on last week's episode with Madeline about her corporate career, I realized something. Most chefs don't even know how many different kinds of corporate chef roles exist. So today I'm breaking it down properly. Not romanticized, not glorified, not demonized either, but just structured. If you're new here, I'm Furkan. I worked in fine dining kitchens like Noma and Mugaritz, moved into R&D and food innovation at the Basque Culinary Center, and today I work as the senior innovation chef at Kraft Heinz. This podcast exists because chefs deserve clarity about the paths outside restaurant kitchens. So let's decode this properly. Corporate chef is an umbrella term. It's not a title, it's not a category, it's not really a job position. Inside large food companies, there are often multiple chef roles with very different functions, and that's what together becomes this umbrella term called corporate chef. Let me break down the most common structures I've seen myself or I've heard from guests on the podcast. I think the primary one and the one term which I think a lot of companies used is R&D chef, right? Research and development chef. They basically are people who are exploring new product pathways. They are testing prototypes, something that is an idea maybe from the marketing team. They're testing, making them into like the most smallest viable prototypes. They are reformulating recipes, maybe for some health standards, maybe for a new label, maybe for a new requirement of the segment. They are possibly running trials of some ideas. They are working closely with food scientists because of the research part of their role, and they operate very early in the pipeline. Their job is very technical, it's very ingredient focused, I would say, and it's also process focused. They ask questions like, can this be made? Can it scale? Can it survive production constraints? So all these limitations that a chef sees within these environments of food companies, R&D chefs are the ones who work together with all these processes and the process engineering behind it to answer these questions of a food company. And then there's the role of the innovation chef, very similar to the role I currently do. I would say, from my perception of it, again, there is no hard line rule around it, but mostly this rule zooms out. Innovation chefs would think, how does this product fit into trends? What is the bigger vision of the company by launching this product? How can this product be positioned within the existing name or the brand of the company? How does packaging, branding, marketing, all these elements of a food company interact with this new food proposition or the new, if it's a flavor proposition, if it's a new food product altogether? These innovation chefs would look at those challenges. They collaborate, I would say, more cross-functionally, whereas an R&D chef would be just working by themselves based on the field notes they have. An innovation chef works together with marketing, strategy, packaging, and teams which are dedicated to brands. So again, amongst the big food companies, like in my case, Kraft Heinz or the PepsiCos, Unilevers of the world, they own multiple brands. Right now, all these brand of these products have their own brand teams. So an innovation chef is the link between, I would say, R&D chef and these brand teams. They would keep the communication fluid. They would make sure what the marketing team is seeing on the ground is translated into the food. So apart from R&D chef, which I already broke down, innovation chef, the third category, which I'm seeing a lot in food companies, are activation chefs. And this role, I feel, is where many of my listeners, many of you people listening out here, many people looking for a shift from restaurant kitchens into food companies could definitely not just fit but thrive. Now, why is that so? Over here, what is happening is the product is already developed. The innovation chef has had a chat, say, with the marketing team. They have made a concept of it. The innovation chef has passed that concept to the R&D chef, who has now made that into a product, in a prototype maybe. And now they're scaling that up in their pilot plant, right? But they always need an activation chef. When the job of the R&D chef and the innovation chef stops is when the activation chef starts, because most companies are on funnels or cycles of innovation or R&D that they do not have time to dedicate the same chefs who have been creating products into activating these product lines. Now, what does activating mean? Once the product is already developed, someone has to create the applications of it, right? It could be any product. Think of any product in your mind. Maybe it is a pack of sour cream, it is cream cheese, maybe it's some sort of a sauce, maybe it's some sort of a new sort of flour to make breads, maybe it's a gluten-free flour, or whatever that product is. The R&D and innovation chef create these new products. They create the proposition for their product within the, so the innovation chef is creating the proposition of how does this new sort of gluten-free flour fit into the market. The R&D chef makes the best flour possible within that concept of the product. The activation chef will basically design recipes. They will test use cases. They will see how is this adapted for home cooks, how is this adapted for the restaurant sector, how is it adapted for the food service. So they make these applications. They basically translate products into real world usage and context. So they basically are the bridge between product and application. Any company, they don't just need to be innovative, but the innovation can also come from the application of the product. A product can be made for a certain use. Maybe it's a spice blend meant for a certain application. But when this company wants to expand into a new market, it's these application chefs who are being very creative to see how this can be applied into the consumers' challenges or the consumers' pain points. So that I feel is one role which all of you listening should look at, because I feel many of the skills you already have can be applied, and this could be an easy entrance into a corporate chef role, being somebody who's possibly responsible for this activation chef role. And every company calls it a different way, honestly, but I just want to break it down for you into the most understandable terms so that you know where you could kind of pitch yourself to these food companies. The next category that I'm seeing after R&D chef, innovation chef, activation chef, the next big one I'm seeing is menu development chefs or QSR related relations with the food company. So these chefs, I would say, are the ones who work directly with QSRs. QSRs are quick service restaurants, so your McDonald's, KFCs, Burger Kings of the world, fast casual brands. So there is something that divides. Bear with me, it's very complicated to understand, but there are brands which look like a QSR. So yes, they are very much franchisee models, very much sort of a chain, but they are a little more elite or a little more exclusive, I would say, than a QSR. So those are the fast casual brands. There are chain concepts of companies that work like a chain to kind of scale up their availability of their offer in different locations. So these chefs from a food company point of view will specially create products, concepts, design the menus around their products. So what does this mean? For example, if I am a bread company, say, I want to make sure my bread is sold in every quick service restaurant and every fast casual chain, because that is a very big scale operation. But to be able to do that, there are maybe 10,000 more vendors who are selling breads as well. I have to make sure I have a chef who's responsible for justifying why my bread is the best one that this company, say Burger King or KFC, should use for their burgers. Now that is a very challenging proposition, because there's everybody competing with you, but maybe it could be the scale of consistency you can have as a big food company. Maybe it is the flavors. Maybe it is that you have a trends department which studies what sort of trends are coming in the market, and your breads are already future proofed for that. Maybe your breads are, say, gluten free. Maybe your breads last longer. Maybe the quick service restaurant, which has a lot of restaurants around the country, needs a very stable supply, something that doesn't go bad very fast, something that lasts on the shelf, something that has more satisfaction rate from the consumer. So it could be many factors, but there are chefs involved in these processes as well. So sort of pitching these menu development ideas to quick service restaurants to kind of compete within their segments. So there are chefs who are dedicated just to that. So developing menus or developing concepts for these restaurants to directly like kind of plug and play, so that the restaurant that is the client of this food company doesn't really have to innovate. So there is a Christmas promo right now, there is a Halloween promo, or there is some new thing which got viral on Instagram or whatever. If the food company already comes to the QSR or this fast casual chain with a proposition, look, I've seen this trend, I have already developed a product, or I've already developed a sort of menu item that could fit within your brand, and I sell it exclusively to you. I develop the concept, and in turn, I make sure you will buy my product. So this is a kind of dynamic that a menu development or a QSR related chef within a food corporate company could be working at. And just to sum this up, this is a highly commercial role. I would say you have to be somebody who's people facing. You are basically solving the constraints of these chain restaurants. You're solving them for speed, for cost, maybe for their equipment limitations. Many times these quick service restaurants are small spaces. They don't have possibly a certain equipment, and your product answers the challenges not having this equipment creates. Or you possibly make a brand differentiation for this quick service restaurant or a food chain. So these are basically the challenges a menu development chef would solve. Then the next one I think is, I would say, a very common role. Actually, companies that don't even have R&D departments or R&D chefs do have something called business development chef or sales support chef. Every company or every, I would say, region calls it a different way. But these chefs, I would say, are the ones who are often misunderstood. When you look at these chefs, you will think they are the ones doing R&D or they are the ones who are doing the innovation at this food company. But mostly these chefs, their role is to go with the sales team to clients. How does this work? These chefs basically go with your sales regional manager of this region, and they will show demonstrations of products live. So this could be from a food company to even an equipment company. An equipment like Thermomix, rational ovens, all these things need a chef to accompany when a sales pitch is being made, right? So if I'm a restaurant and somebody as a sales guy in a suit and tie comes and tells me this oven is great, I'm not really buying that. But just unless I know the brand myself and I've used it myself, but if I see a new product, how I'm going to trust something coming from somebody who's not even cooked with that device in front of me? So mostly these companies go with a business development chef who is this link between the food company and the client, whoever it is, that in that case, restaurants, retail consumers, whoever that is. So these chefs create kind of these demonstrations live for these products or equipments. They also create tastings. Maybe they're creating some range of tastings of competitors, maybe the range of products they have. They're also creating on-site applications. Now, don't confuse this with application chefs, because application chefs are working to create a whole brochure around a product, whereas the ones doing business development and doing on-site application is they enter your burger restaurant and they show you how this mayonnaise or how this certain sauce can be spread, or how it can be emulsified, how it can be mixed with some other sauce, and you have a new flavor edge, say, so to say. They speak the chef language, and that is a big factor, because these chefs, the language they speak is not very sales like, but it's more kitchen like. So it's easier to make a sales when you have a chef on your team who is pitching the product the way it has to be pitched on its functionality rather than its price point or whatever that is. The qualities I would look in a person who is a business development chef, and this is sort of like an introspection for you listening. If you think the things I'm going to say relate with you, maybe you're a good person to be a business development chef. I would say these people are technically strong, they are commercially aware, and they are good communicators. So, technically aware means if you can come up with the product you're working with, if you have some techniques in your mind that you've used in restaurants, you have to know them thoroughly because you're making them from scratch, maybe with a new product. Maybe you're working for a company which makes egg replacements. So, you have to be good at understanding how an egg works, and then you can on the ground come up with how this egg alternative can fit into a new kind of client's purchase and how they would love to apply it into their own restaurants. Then I would say commercially aware in the sense that you should know where you lie, you should know how business works, you should know what kind of competition is there in the market. If these things interest you, the commercial side of things, you could be a contender for this job. And also good communicators. You should be very good at communicating, because at the end that's the core of the job, to make a sales pitch, but in chef whites and doing some demonstrations with it. If you hate presenting, this role will honestly crush you. So it's not for people who do not like presenting. But if you love explaining food, if you love presenting, if you love showcasing something, you will shine in this role. The sixth one, but very much important as well, is institutional and systems chef. So, in the next few episodes, we'll speak to Kevin Jenkins, who's working in institutional catering. We've spoken to Dan Gisti before, who works. He has a company called Brigade, which puts chefs into schools. So, these are some roles where chefs operate basically in school districts. They work in healthcare systems. They work in airlines, sort of large catering institutions. And that's again a role. It's also again corporate, because many a times once you grow up the ranks, you're not really cooking, but you're kind of designing the menus for it. You are kind of making calculations of, like, if you're a large catering institution and maybe you have crab on the menu in some season, you are purchasing crab for next year already. So it's these kind of calculations you're making. You're kind of making these repeatable systems. So in a school catering, you have to make sure it's scalable what you're doing. You are standardizing recipes to scale them up, and you're also training for the scales, like you're training for these large scale operations, how they work. So maybe operating big machines, operating calculations which are not just for 10, 15 people, but maybe it's like 200, 500,000. Maybe you are working for armies, militaries, all these caterings operations that require feeding a lot of people. That is again a very important role, and sometimes the role could not be to do with cooking, but maybe budgeting, maybe staffing, maybe purchasing equipments, programming purchases, creating propositions which are scalable yet interesting. So that's again one opportunity I would say for people looking outside restaurant into corporate roles, which is the systems or institutional chefs. Now, corporate chefs don't just exist at food companies. They exist in many sectors. They exist in manufacturing of food. They could exist in CPG brands, packaged foods, frozen meals. They are possibly working at beverage companies. Now, you won't think of it, but beverage companies like Starbucks, for example, somebody who sells coffees, also has chefs behind these projects because, again, a recipe is for food or for beverage. It's, at the end, is putting things into proportion and making them scalable. So that's also where chef opportunities for these corporate roles could exist. They could also be in flavor houses. Like there are these big flavor companies which are behind everything that you eat, honestly. It's not really, when you eat a paprika flavored chips, it's not really made with paprika, but flavors of paprika. And these companies also need chefs to understand what is an authentic flavor of a paprika, or how can you simulate that on a flavor level. Then there are these equipment companies. So as I said before, many equipment companies need chefs not just to accompany them to sell, which is what I highlighted before, but also while testing their own equipments like ovens, gadgets, new sort of machines. Some of these chefs demo these machines, test these machines. There are also roles for corporate chefs, I would say, in hotel groups. So, of course, hotels have restaurants and have chefs cooking in it, but they also need people who are corporate culinary directors who standardize the menu, who execute these trainings worldwide to make sure that the consistency across hotel chains is maintained. Another sector where I'm seeing a lot of growing need for corporate chefs is startups. A lot of startups are creating solutions for a lot of pain points of our food system, which is, say, plant based proteins. It could be the technology around fermentation. It could be alternative ingredients, things that we are running out of as humanity, as resources like coffee, chocolate. A lot of these companies creating alternatives for these need chefs in their company, of course, to kind of be able to develop these products honestly, but also to sell them at the end of the day. There's also platforms creating new ingredients. So these are just more about the technology behind the creation of the ingredient, not the ingredient itself. And these sort of companies definitely need corporate chefs. There's also a lot of corporate chefs who are working far from, say, production of food, but production of ingredients. So suppliers of ingredients, maybe it's spices, maybe it's bases of things, maybe some sort of condiments. All these companies also, of course, have a lot of corporate chefs. The point I'm trying to make here to show you all these examples is not for you to go tomorrow and search, Furkan mentioned this sort of company. So let me look what companies exist in this sector and then look at jobs over there. But the idea is to disconnect the fact that corporate chef is equal to a chef who sits in an office. It's chefs who are embedded into industry infrastructure, so they are irreplaceable, and the demand is only growing. The third part of this podcast, after telling you what corporate chefs are, how different roles are there in this, where could they work, these corporate chefs, let's get into more about what do these corporate chefs actually do, because I think that's very important as well, what your day-to-day looks like, to understand if you want to be in it. So I would start with killing fantasy. You're not going to be plating micro herbs. You are not going to be cooking a lot, possibly. You're not going to be um, I would say it does sound like a lot of R&D and testing food, but maybe your job day to day doesn't revolve that much around food as you would want it to. If you're somebody who's looking, maybe restaurants drive you because you get to be around food every day. So as a corporate chef, you are possibly mostly into meetings. You are writing documentations. Even if you're producing things, if even if you're testing something, you're documenting a lot of it, and the documenting is what takes the most times, honestly. You are running repeat tests. So if you're creating a product, maybe for the whole year, for the whole 6 months, for the whole 3 months the project lasts, you're just repeating the same thing again and again, making minor adjustments to it. So it is a very repetitive job. You're working within cost targets, so you do not have the freedom to honestly work with every ingredient possible, to be able to, yeah, as in restaurants, we are kind of used to throw things into the pot, whatever comes on the way, ordering fancy ingredients. So in food companies, of course, it's all about cost. They want to scale something. So you work within these targets and limitations. You always adjust for margins. You are very much presenting internally these concepts, externally these concepts. So presenting is a big part of these jobs. And you're always in this, yeah, dilemma between negotiation, making compromises, because being a corporate chef is very structured. It's collaborative. It gets very political as well. These jobs, they are also very strategic. There's a lot of strategy behind the daily decisions you will make. As I said in the beginning, it's very likely you will cook less than you expect. Sometimes it's 30% cooking, 70% communication. But again, every company does this differently. So I don't think one size fits all, but it is very likely it will hit you that you're not cooking as often as you would think in a corporate chef role. And then let's attack the other myths. For example, a lot of people tell me when Marilyn's episode came out, while talking with her as well, and other corporate chefs I've interviewed, it sounds like it is selling out because big food companies do have a fame for themselves. So when chefs from restaurant industry, which looks like the most, I would say, humble way of being in relation with food, where it's very natural, you get gratification immediately when you serve something to your consumer or whoever your diner is at this restaurant. Corporate chef is mostly told to be a role where you're selling out. But my question to those people is, if chefs don't enter industry, who builds the food system? You can criticize from outside. Of course, you can keep criticizing food companies from the outside, but if you really want to contribute to change, the only way is to be on the inside of it. You don't want to leave these things to food technologists or chemists designing food. You have to be inside the food system, which is why I don't think it's a sellout. I think, of course, there are realistic margins that only work at food companies, but there is room for creativity to make those margins your playing field and still be able to create something that is honest, sincere, good for the system, good for the world at large. But that is the honest truth. It is something which is very limiting. It is a job which is very limiting, but I do not really think it's selling out, because I think the most creative people are the ones who work under limitations and inside these constraints. And I feel this corporate chef roles give you a lot of room to be able to creative in that sense of the word. The second myth actually I want to break down is connected to this one, which is it is less creative to be inside a food company. I would say restaurant creativity is more about artistic expression, whereas corporate creativity is solving constraints. You're constantly facing either some regulatory law or some health law, or it's a trend, or it's a consumer that we believe the consumer wants this. You're constantly creating, but this creativity is solving constraints. Can you make something delicious at 1.2 euro per serving? Can you make something delicious and still have 6 week shelf life, or be produced industrially, or have 10,000 units per batch? That I think is very creative, to be able to have all these parameters and still be able to create something delicious. It's just very different than having, say, an unlimited budget or a much higher budget and having this freedom of artistic expression. The third myth, which I also tackled in another episode of mine 2, 3 episodes ago, talking about education. So many will think to be a corporate chef, you need another degree. Most people I've had on the podcast, I always make an effort, with me being myself, who's not formally gone through education that people believe you need for these jobs. I try to invite people who have not gone through that themselves. So I feel a degree in food science or knowing about food technology does help. I'm not saying it doesn't help, but companies, I think, from what I've seen in interviews myself, talking to people in the community that I'm building with the podcast, I see companies in food are looking for communication, commercial awareness, problem solving. That's a massive skill companies are looking out for, adaptability, and ability to think in systems. So when I had the interview for my job 3 months ago now, I was given a case study. I was never asked for my degrees. Yes, they said you have to submit a degree for the procedure, but they never asked me, oh, what did you study in that degree? What subjects did you study? How did you score on these subjects? None of that was a question. The question was, I was given a case study to solve a problem within the food company and how I would approach them. And that's what these people are looking for. They're looking for, if you have this culinary edge, if you can work within constraints, if you can solve your problems. And I had to present that case study. So presentation skills, your communication skills, and to be able to think in systems. So when you're tackling a problem as somebody who's culinary forward, you can't just isolate yourself. You have to think if that has room enough for the packaging team to work, for the marketing team to work. Did you take these things into account? Because corporate environments are a system. They're not just you making the fanciest dish possible. The next part I want to focus on in this episode is what kind of people would thrive in this role. Because a lot of you listening would wonder, okay, great, all this sounds amazing, but will I be someone who fits, but not only fits, thrives in this kind of an environment? I would say, from my personal experience, I have seen both sides of the coin, or multiple sides of the coin. I feel you will thrive if you enjoy structure, you think in systems. You don't need spotlight, because that can also happen. A lot of these corporate chef roles, they are not, nobody is opening a pack of Lays or a pack of Doritos and saying, "Wow, this is the," and taking a picture of this Doritos packet and tagging the chef, "Hey, this chef made this Doritos," because nobody knows you, who's the person. Nobody knows. I'm trying with this podcast to put the spotlight on chefs who are working at these food companies, but most often nobody knows who's behind these products. So you have to be honest that you will not be in the spotlight. You will also thrive if you like collaboration, working with different not just parts of the company but different disciplines, because you could be in the same department, you could be in the culinary department, but you have people who are coming from different disciplines of science or different disciplines of food, and you will have to collaborate with them. So if you like that, you will definitely thrive. You can explain ideas clearly. I think that is a big skill. If, as I said, if you can communicate and if you can express what you think, if you can express what you are kind of ideating in your head, if you can express that well, you will definitely thrive in this environment. At the same time, I have to also share with you who would struggle. If you are somebody who needs full creative control, if you are somebody who freaks out to kind of build something and then somebody else builds upon them and then it comes back to you, if you struggle with this sort of collaboration and you need full creative control, you will definitely struggle being a corporate chef. If you hate meetings, if you hate reading emails, if you hate using the computer, if you hate creating PowerPoints, all of this grouped into one, if you hate these sort of the corporate side of a corporate chef role, you will definitely not like being a corporate chef. If you're somebody who resists compromise, that's also very much ingrained in chefs to not, yeah, to not like to compromise. Like if the guest is asking for salt, I don't want to give salt because I know how it has to be seasoned. You will not like this job because it's compromise is a big part of this. And if you define identity through prestige, through, yeah, how restaurants work, you will definitely struggle in this job. Corporate chef, I would say, is not an escape from difficulty. That's not what I'm trying to sell with my podcast. I would say it's a different kind of difficulty. It's still a tough environment to work in. As chefs, of course, you have your fixed timings and you have your weekends off and all of that. But it's still a tough environment to be able to thrive in. Now, towards the end of this episode, should you consider being a corporate chef? Should you consider this being your next step in your career? I would say before you jump, ask yourself, do I want broader impact? Do I want stability? Do I want structured growth, cross functional collaborations, all the things that I said a corporate chef role can give you? Or do I want kitchen adrenaline? Maybe that's something you want. Or do I want creative autonomy? You want me to be the owner of your ideas. You want to be the one who works on your ideas by yourself. Maybe you want immediate guest feedback. If you want that instant gratification, what restaurants give, both these sides are valid, but you need to know what do you want for yourself. And these are just different games. I think none of it is right or wrong. It's just that it's a give and take and depends on what words I said or what statements I made resonated more with you is the side of the coin that you will favor you the most, you know? I would say while I close this episode, I would say corporate chef is not one job, is what's my idea over here, because I don't want you to go on look for corporate chef jobs on LinkedIn. That's what I wanted to break down with this episode, how different it is. I would say it is an ecosystem where you have all these six type of corporate chef roles that I listed down. And if you are considering this path, also an advice I would try to give you as somebody within the industry is don't romanticize it. Understand it. Try to understand. Speak to somebody you know. I mean, I'm an open book. You can always speak to me. I do these meetups once in a while. We have one coming up this week itself. So speak to people who are in these roles. Try to understand them, and also if you are people who are listening and are already working as corporate chef, if you're one corporate chef who's listening to this episode, tell me what I missed, because it's very likely in the little I've seen of this industry, possibly I've missed out parts of the corporate chef I would say business. So please write down to me in comments on YouTube, on Spotify, wherever you are. Tell me what I have missed out, because the more we decode these notes, the less opaque this transition becomes. But I would say, please get in touch with me, interact below the Spotify comments, interact under the YouTube comments, follow the podcast, rate it, like it, because I feel every step that you do, it takes like 2 seconds to go on Apple Podcasts, rate the podcast, or go on Spotify and leave a feedback. I feel these things take very little energy from you as a listener. For me, it takes a lot of energy, of course, to produce it, but I enjoy this honestly, to break down these concepts, which I myself had questions for when I was sitting down, I don't know, 5 years ago, thinking, what else can I do apart from restaurants? I wished for myself if there were resources like this. So it takes you a few seconds to rate this podcast or follow it. But when you do that, it does help. The algorithm works in a way that it reaches other listeners who could be having questions like these. So not just for me, but for those who want to listen to episodes like this, help them out by just rating this podcast. And that's about it. I will come back next week, another episode with another guest. But for now, I hope this episode has helped you. This has been Fugitive Chefs Podcast. Thanks for listening.